Hey girl, it's Johanna with God is Glamorous, where we learn how to live our best lives through Jesus Christ. And today, I'm going to help you stop waiting for the perfect time. So I am sure that God has placed an amazing vision or an amazing dream or an amazing purpose or project on your heart. And oftentimes, it is very, very common to wait for the perfect time to get these things done. However, I am here to remind you that there is no such thing as the perfect timing. And in order to truly do what God has called you to do, you're going to have to push past your comfort zone and do it anyway, regardless of whether or not you feel as though you have resources to complete that purpose. So we're going to be taking a look at the Book of Esther and finding all the ways in which we can learn from her and just go for it and to pursue our purpose without waiting for the perfect timing. And this is exactly what Esther has done. So if you have never heard of the story of Esther, I'm going to give you a brief rundown. However, if you have, go ahead and skip ahead. I'll leave the timestamp below so we can get exactly into the specific points that I want to help you with. So if you have never heard of Esther, the book actually takes place in the Book of Esther. And the story has four main characters. So there is Queen Esther, there is Mordecai, Esther's cousin, who actually adopted Esther. There is King Xerxes, and there is Haman, which is the antagonist in the story. So essentially, Esther is promoted queen. King Xerxes' queen. He calls for a beauty pageant because he wants to find a new queen. Esther essentially outshines everyone else, and she is promoted to queen. Esther, however, is an orphan, and she lost both of her parents when she was young, and her cousin, Mordecai, actually adopted her. So essentially, Haman gets promoted to one of the king's chief advisors, and because Mordecai, Esther's cousin, does not want to bow to Haman, he essentially encourages the king to assassinate all the Jews. So Esther is also a Jew, but she essentially keeps that quiet because she does not want that to interfere with her ability to become queen. So when they find out that Haman crafted this evil plan to assassinate all the Jews, Mordecai goes to Esther and says, "We need you to do something," and just encourages her to speak to the king because she could possibly be the one to persuade the king to overturn this rule to assassinate the Jews. So Esther knows that she is unable to go to the king because if she goes to the king without being summoned, then she could possibly be killed. You know the saying, "Don't come for me unless I send for you." Well, that's essentially where it originated from. Queens were not supposed to enter a king's presence, or anyone for that matter, unless the king actually summoned for them. And if they actually went into the king's presence without being summoned, they could actually be killed. So we're going to be taking a look at Esther and how we are able to emulate the things that she does and how we are just able to go for it regardless of whether or not the timing may be perfect. Because when God places an assignment on our heart, sometimes if we don't pursue that assignment or that vision or that purpose, it can affect other people. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first point that I want to make is the fact that regardless of where you come from, God still has an amazing purpose and an amazing destiny for your life. So Esther was raised as an orphan. She didn't grow up with parents. She didn't come from this lavish lifestyle. She was adopted by her cousin, and regardless of her situation, she was still promoted to a queen. Maybe you come from a family who didn't have a lot of money, or maybe you come from poverty, or maybe you were an orphan, or maybe you were adopted, or whatever the case may be. Regardless of what background that you come from, God still has an amazing purpose and an amazing destiny for your life. I also want to encourage you to not wait for the perfect time. So this is so important. When God gives you an amazing purpose or an amazing destiny for your life, we oftentimes can feel as though we have to wait until the timing is perfect. We have to wait until we have enough money or enough resources or enough time. Maybe you are a student, or maybe you're working full time, or maybe you're a mom and you just don't feel like you have enough time. I'm here to let you in on a little secret. There is never going to be enough time. And when you wait for that perfect moment where you feel as though you finally have it all together, chances are that opportunity can pass you by. When God gives you a purpose or a destiny on your life and you wait too long, chances are God may use someone else. So it's really, really important to know that there will never be a perfect time. And as long as you have God on your side, God will help you get through those challenges, regardless of how difficult the situation may be. And this is exactly what Esther does. So when it's time for her to save the Jews and talk to King Xerxes, she knows that she could be killed if she goes to the king without being summoned. But her cousin Mordecai still encourages her to speak with the king anyway. And this is what he says. So he says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" So Mordecai made a really, really interesting point, and he said, if you don't deliver us, if you don't fulfill your purpose, God will still deliver us by another situation. And just like I mentioned before, if you wait and if you don't do what God has called you to do, although God wants to use you, God will still be able to use someone else. So make sure that you are living out your purpose and going for it regardless of how difficult the situation may seem. And he also said, perhaps you were born for such a time as this. And this applies exactly to you as well. Perhaps you were born for such a time as this. And just remember that God has placed you in this perfect position, in this perfect setting, so that you are able to be all that he has called you to be. So always remember that you are born with a purpose. You are designed for a specific assignment. And with God's help, you are able to allow that vision or that dream to become a reality. All right, so the next point that I want to remind you is to ask for God's help. So there is no question that when God gives you a specific purpose or a specific assignment, it is going to be challenging. Chances are this may be something that you never thought would be possible. Chances are when God places a specific vision or a dream on your heart, it is something that cannot easily be carried out by your own strength. You are going to have to call on God to help you make that vision become a reality. And this is exactly what Esther does. So she calls on a fast of the entire Jewish community for a total of 3 days. And for those 3 days, they were not supposed to eat or drink anything. So it says, "Go and gather together all the Jews of Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my maids will do the same." So if you don't know about the power of fasting, definitely check out this video. But essentially, fasting is a way that unlocks supernatural power and supernatural blessings that don't necessarily always come through prayer. So if God gives you a specific vision or purpose that may be very, very difficult to fulfill, sometimes you're going to have to pray and fast. And that allows you to unlock those supernatural blessings that only God can deliver through prayer and fasting. So another really important thing that I want you to remember is that you should always embrace failure. Embrace failure because that allows you to break past fear. So fear is one of the things that holds you back and prevents you from doing the things that God has called you to do. So Esther embraced failure, and she knew that if she went to the king without being summoned, she could die. But her exact words were, "If I perish, I perish." So she says, "And then, though it is strictly forbidden, I will go in to see the king, and if I perish, I perish." So Esther embraced failure, and she still did what God had called her to do. And this is exactly how you should be as well. She said, "If I perish, I perish." Sometimes you have to say, if it fails, it fails. Sometimes you have to say, well, if I waste all this money, if I lose all this money, then I lose it. I can always get it back. But it's very important to live a life of oh wells, then what ifs. So embrace failure and go for your destiny or your purpose anyway, because ultimately you will succeed with God's help and you'll never regret doing what God has called you to do. Lastly, I want to remind you that people are depending on you to do what God has called you to do. Just like the Jews depended on Esther, there are people that are going to be depending on you. Maybe God has called you to start a business. Imagine all the people that are not going to be served in the ways that they deserve to be served if you don't open that business. Imagine those people who are not going to be inspired in the way in which only you can inspire them if you don't write that book. Sometimes you're going to have to push past your uncomfortable feelings and do what God has called you to do, because people truly are depending on you to be obedient to what God has called you to do. So Ecclesiastes 11:4 says, if you wait for the perfect conditions, you will never get anything done. So I want to end on this final point and remind you to not wait for the perfect time. It will never come. Sometimes you're just going to have to trust God throughout the entire process and realize that there will be hiccups, there will be challenges, but with God's help, you will be able to do anything you set your mind to. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So if you're looking for a sign, this is it. Start the business, write the book, do the crazy thing that has been on your heart for years. So definitely do it. If you need help, seek God, ask God for direction, ask God for wisdom, ask God for resources. And if God gives it to you, God will make sure that it happens. All right, well, if you need help on how to fast, definitely check out this video and definitely check out these other videos on how you're able to start a business. And other than that, I will talk with you next time. Stay glamorous.